So welcome to motion capture technology. I'm much shinier music going. If you're familiar, this song is Laura Palmer by Bastille. If you're familiar with Twin Peaks, Laura Palmer is the person who's murdered in that show. That's my name, which is why my author name is L. Palmer, so you can find me on Google. So welcome to motion capture technology. So why am I here? These are my books, Shoemaker, The Lady and the Frog. They're basically like if you took Once Upon a Time and Downton Abbey and put them together. So if I write period piece fairy tale retellings, why am I talking to you about motion capture? I have a degree in English and film from the University of California, Santa Barbara. The number two part school in the nation. My master's is from BYU. Very different experience. And I really love good storytelling. I also love spaceships and Boba Fett, which is why I write fairy tale retellings, right? So a little bit about you guys. So why are you here? So I'm figuring you guys are film and video game makers. You're an actor, or you just really love good storytelling. So how many of you guys are here as film or video game makers? Okay, how many of you guys are here because you are interested in motion capture acting? And how many of you guys are here because you just think it's cool and you love good storytelling? Well, that's a great reason too. So in this presentation, so first of all, if you go to my website, it's a little blurry here. You can go to the events page, and I have a download of the PowerPoint. You can download, there's one with notes with YouTube videos and links, and in the PowerPoint there's an extra about 5 or 6 slides that's kind of an appendix of additional information of equipment and things that aren't going to fit into this presentation. I also have postcards that have a preview of the first couple chapters of both of my books, and I have the link to my website, so you're welcome to take one of those. These are up here. We can get that afterward.
Is that download going to be available next week?
Yes.
Will you only have access to your computer?
I'll probably just leave it on there because it's not worth the effort of taking it down. It's practical reality. So we're going to define motion capture. We're going to give you the quick film and video game maker's guide. We're going to talk about the actor's guide, and then we're going to talk about crossing the uncanny valley. If you don't know what the uncanny valley is at this point, that's okay, because we're going to get there, and you'll know it by the end of the presentation. Motion capture. Who here can give me just a short, quick definition of motion capture? Yeah.
And that's where, as far as I know, it's the cheapest and fastest way to do animation, where you put a person in a green or blue suit with the golf balls or whatever it is to give the camera something to focus on, and they act out their scene, and it captures that motion, then assigns it to a skeleton in the computer of the whatever character you want them to be.
Yeah.
And it makes an almost instant, well, it can be instantaneous. They can do it on the fly and put it into a character.
Yeah. So it's an almost instantaneous way of creating animated characters.
When you interact with live actors,
Yeah.
as a character, you can do it.
Yeah. So if you want to make like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, Smaug from The Hobbit, Dark Lord Snoke from The Force Awakens. So my simple definition is using digital technology to capture and enhance a live performance.
More believable motion.
It's more believable motion. So if you watch a lot of the Marvel films, some of the stuff is done with motion capture, for example, with the Hulk, or even with the ones with even Captain America, they do some motion capture with that so that they can put it into a more dangerous stunt that they can do digitally and not hurt anybody. So the fancy definition is using LEDs or similar tracking devices, great points for recording motion as digital animation. That's your quick definition. So why do we use motion capture? And you covered a few. What's your name?
Orlo Goodson.
Orlo Goodson. Nice to meet you, Orlo.
Glad to meet you.
So it's a hybrid of puppetry and animation. Puppetry allows you to have that live performance and that live action. Animation takes a lot more planning, and so motion capture kind of blends those two performance styles and storytelling techniques into one. And there's Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk over there making a really great face. It's cheaper in higher definition than most practical effects. That could be a whole other conversation. It makes the impossible possible. So things that we couldn't have made 20, 30 years ago, we can now make these crazy and awesome creatures and characters and have them do these amazing things on the screen. So I'm going to give you a quick history of motion capture. We're going to cover a century of cinema in about 4 minutes. In 1950, Max Fleischer invented what's called the rotoscope. The rotoscope was a revolutionary technique in animation where the film was projected onto a screen that the animator then drew over to follow a performance. And we'll have all of examples of all of these in just a second. In the 1970s and 80s, motion capture was actually developed as part of biomedical research. And I love all of the stuff in life where it's pulled from science and research and then pulled into the arts. And that transformed into digital puppetry. Jim Henson's studio did a lot to try to really push that motion capture. In the 90s to 2000s, it started doing live action characters and animated films like Final Fantasy The Spirit Within. And in the mid-2000s today, we've moved beyond that to this hybrid of live action and motion capture that's ultra real, which we'll kind of talk about more of that at the end. Oh, I didn't introduce that right. Let's try that again. So now we're going to have example. So those are some nice bullet points, and they're doing medieval weapons next door. So that's some fun stuff over there to listen to in between. I cut together the history of motion capture in about 3 minutes. So we're going to go over, like I said, a century of cinema in 3 minutes. That's actually 1991. I got the year wrong. But that's okay.
Everybody goes.
So that was a century of filmmaking and the development of motion capture from 1915 to Rogue One, which is, we'll talk about that toward the end. So the filmmaker's guide, when you're making a film, you have what's called the pipeline, especially when you're doing digital things, of how you get it from pre-production to actually being a finished product. So this is kind of a simplified version. So you set up your studio. This is starting with your production. You set up your studio and your motion capture equipment. You capture performance in your motion capture software. You render to 3D animation software. Render the character, composite with live action and background footage, and then you render your final film. So 7 easy steps to having a completed film, which could take a lot more time. There's might be some steps missing in there, but that's just kind of a general idea. So the equipment you typically need are multi-depth cameras and or multi-camera systems. So now we're talking about, from the filmmaker's perspective, what are you doing? And I know there's some few people in here who do film for a living, so feel free to speak up if you see anything that you want to kind of add to that. There's a motion capture marker system, so that'll typically be, we typically think of the suit, like the scuba suit with little dots on it. Then there's motion capture software. You need 3D animation software, and you need compositing software to put that all together. So I've kind of broken it down into a couple different size studio, of your studio sizes and how much that budget would be. These are estimates of what I found online. I'm more of an academic with film than a practitioner, so these numbers might be
Is this
a little
available
off.
on your website?
Yeah, all of this information is on the PowerPoint on my website because there's a ton of information, and I figured let's make this as easy as possible for people to do, because I'm covering a lot of ground in these 50 minutes. So this is a no-budget studio, $300 to a couple $1,000s. This one is using the video here is using a couple of PlayStation Move controllers, so video game controllers, and a Kinect camera hooked up to a computer.
So it doesn't have to be in front of the green screen.
Doesn't have to be, he's just in his office doing this. When we get a little later in the video, I think he uses Blender, which is a freeware animation software, to kind of put a skin over, put a layer of the animation over, there we go, what he's doing. So he's done the skeleton, and then we've added that. And so this is just using a Kinect to software, some freeware, it's low-end software that costs a couple $100. Small studio space, he's in his office. And simple trackers, you can do kind of a DIY suit with ping pong balls or something that's reflective that will be picked up by the multi-depth
It
camera.
patches the tape.
Probably.
You could use tape if it was colored. If it's like brightly colored, like a fluorescent color.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you have the Sun Budget Studio. This is a cool suit that has, I don't remember how many trackers it has. I have a link to that in the what you can download online. But this one is one where you can go pretty much anywhere in film motion capture live on set. And there's several suits that have been developed over the last year or two that allow that to happen.
I've seen them on the internet.
Yeah. This one was on featured on nofilmschool.com. If you're interested in film and you haven't checked out that site, I highly recommend it. Small to moderate studio space, markerless or entry-level suit. Because the previous one we did is basically markerless. You can do one without anything using the Kinect and the software. So you actually don't need the suit, but you're going to get a much better capture with some sort of a suit to track the motion.
So the hardest of things.
Yeah, but that's facial capture. So motion capture is like, I'm a bird and I'm flying, and facial capture is, I'm angry and I'm sad, or whatever emotions you're showing. And there are a ton of muscles in the face that make that facial capture very complicated. So you can do it, but that's
I did an animated film when I was in college.
Uh-huh.
I did a 7-minute animated film. It took me 7 months to do it.
Yeah, I did a 3-second animated film for my animation class, and it took me like 3 weeks.
That's
to
what
do
got me
a couple
started
seconds.
going down this pathway. This is faster.
This is a lot faster. Just to give you a little background with film is traditionally 24 frames per second. And so if you think of animation, hand-drawn animation, that means if you're doing it at full quality, that's 24 drawings per second.
We usually shot each
So
film
you can do
twice.
that math for a feature-length film. And there's ways to cut that down and the shortcuts that people take, but that's why so much animation is now done digitally, because the computer systems really cut down on the tedious work and they can focus more on the art side and the logo. So this is a higher-end studio. This video is from, I just blanked at the company. They're one of the top companies. I have it listed there. So you have a multi-camera system, you've got the full suit, you've got a larger studio space. So I'm going to kind of let this play. He's kind of showing, capturing the motion. Motion capture is used for video games, just for background characters. They'll be like the old man walking, and then they'll be like, I'm just going to tap dance through the town. Whatever you want for your background characters. For a video game, you can do that with motion capture. And again, it cuts down on your animation time because you're not having to do the movement in the computer. So here, this is called a t-test, or not t-test. That's a statistics thing. Oh.
Well, if you wanted to make a multi-leg creature, you just have people hang on to each other's waist, capture the motion going through the thing, and assign it to the creature.
I think you can get as creative as you want. So it goes on and shows how it composites, but you got other things. So here's a big budget studio example. This is from the first of the new Planet of the Apes movies, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and showing that they did stuff on set with green screen backgrounds and a bunch of people in motion capture outfits doing that. It's some really incredible work. And we'll have a video that covers this later, but the light thing that's down here, that's part of the facial capture, capturing the emotions of what the actor's doing. So this also uses a multi-camera system. This is, you're talking about high-end software, a couple $1,000s per year to use, a large studio plus locations. You're going to be using professional level suit and equipment. You're going to be probably, a lot of companies, a lot of film productions are going to be bringing in a vendor of some kind, a contractor that brings in the equipment and has the expertise to capture all of this. And that's going to cost you a very pretty penny. Get very expensive. So this will not be my first motion capture film, will not be that quality, right? But it's some pretty incredible work. So then we're going to talk a little bit about so the actor's guide. As you might have noticed, Andy Serkis has played a few motion capture characters. Do you guys know who Andy Serkis has played?
King Kong.
Gollum. Who else?
Smeagol.
What?
And Smeagol.
And Smeagol. He played Gollum and Smeagol. That's very good. He plays Caesar in the new Planet of the Apes movies. He plays, Snoke in Star Wars movies. And so he's a pioneer of the performance side of motion capture and is working very hard to get motion capture actors to be recognized by the Screen Actors Guild and by award shows. There was talks both when he played Gollum and when he played Caesar of him possibly being nominated for an Oscar, but it's very controversial of how much of that performance is animation and how much of that performance is an actor. It's him acting. So he and other actors who are trying to get better representation with the Screen Actors Guild call it performance capture, especially with facial capture, because that even though they've layered animation on top of it, it's still them, swing a big axe, swinging the big axe, and having the emotive moments. And you can't have the performance of the animated character without the full and lively performance of the actor. And I've got a great video on that in a second. So they're working on better representation, a better deal with the Screen Actors Guild, so that they have better union representation. He won the Empire Award for his performance as Caesar for Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the second one. So he won the Best Actor Award because they were trying to kind of push forward that representation. If you're interested in performance capture acting, there's some classes and certification. Several of them are in London, so that's a little far from Utah. Others are in LA, but look at your local community, see if you can see anything come up. I also have a list of specific classes in the appendix of the PowerPoint you can download online. And the actor's job is to create the illusion of reality through their performance. So it's not just like, hi, I'm doing a motion capture thing. It would be like, if we were to do motion capture Hamlet, it would be like, to be or not to be, that is the question. You want to have that, like, I'm being ridiculous on purpose, but you want that full-on, full energy performance just the same as you were on a set or a theater stage. So I think that's great for directors to know with working with actors, and also actors to know when they're going out there and trying to build things. Amy Circus runs the Imaginarium, which is a consulting company that helps with motion capture. So he's worked on The Hobbit, he's worked on Star Wars, he's worked on a lot of things. So pretty much most of the high-end Hollywood motion capture that's done, his company's probably involved at some point.
Those prices you had were renting prices then, Lucy? Not buying?
The 50,000 plus was just kind of an estimate because you'd have to put in a proposal, but I would imagine it would be expensive.
To straight buy it, to straight out buy the equipment.
Well, that depends on what level of equipment you want, because to straight out buy would be, for the high-end Hollywood end, would be expensive. If you want to just go with the very basic Connect, you can do $300. So you're looking at like $300 to in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. There's a balance. So we're gonna just watch a little bit of Benedict Cumberbatch. This is a special feature from The Hobbit, and I think it's just a great illustration of acting. Because I can talk all about it, but I think it's a lot better to see it.
Well, thief. I smell you, I can hear your breath, so why don't you show yourself? Well, thief, I smell you. I hear your breath. I feel your air. Where are you? Where are you?
You get the helmet on, and the helmet has a sort of Madonna-type headset thing, which is actually a camera which comes to here. This camera is really weird because it's right in your face. It's got a little circle of LED lights, so you're literally carrying around the actress's dream. You have your own little private keynote. It's really nice, but actually it's very, very weird. And then you kind of have to forget it and imagine yourself into a vast creature in a huge space when you're really crawling around on a grey bit of carpet.
Benedict's choices as an actor were definitely going to affect it big time. I said, treat it like you're playing a role. Don't think you're just providing a voice. Go in there physically, get what you can out of it. There will be head turns, there will be moments from that performance that he did that can be pulled out and extrapolated and will become part of the small. I kill wherever I please, and none can stop me.
So, you get to play it live. There is an element of theatre to it because you do have an audience, even though they're watching this thing through very, highly skilled and attuned technology. You get the feeling that you're playing to them a little bit. I had a very very strong idea of what he felt and looked and would smell and move like. I really did, but whether I did that in my motion or animation of my body, I'm not sure, but I knew in my mind what I was trying to do. I played it as an internal thought of, I am this, I am that, I can do that, I can do this, but whilst my body's going, and just acting out everything that I'm thinking. You have to take a very big leap of faith and just think big, really.
So I think that says it a lot better than I can. That was like the Madonna had said. This is another issue with actors. One thing I want you to think about is, so the first question is, does anybody know who Camilla Luddington is? Does anybody play any of the modern versions of Tomb Raider? So Camilla Luddington is the performance capture actress who plays Lara Croft in the modern version of Tomb Raider, which has sold over 1 million games. It is very popular, but you don't realize that is a person behind it. So this is a really, I really like this clip because it kind of covers the technical side as well as the acting side. The voice is a little fast, but I think it's a really great example.
Hello, my name's Frank Campbell. I'm a Polygon. I'm looking at Rise of the Tomb Raider, or more specifically, how Rise of the Tomb Raider is being made. I recently went to visit the developers of Crystal Dynamics, just outside San Francisco, and I spent the afternoon talking to the artists about how they went about creating Lara Croft for this new game. It's coming out on the Xbox 360 and the Xbox One in November. Obviously, a lot of the work is done in a motion capture studio. You can see here the actor Camilla Luddington and how she offers the voice and the movement and also the facial expressions of this character. But then the magic happens back in the studio when the artists get to grips with the footage that they've been given, and they use the technology that's available to them today to create a character who looks believable, who seems like she could actually exist in real life. When I spoke to the artist, one of them mentioned to me that the most difficult thing that you can do today in video games is create somebody that looks like a human being. And here you can get a sense of the scale of the problem. Individually, they have to create something that looks right in terms of eyes, hair, lips, skin, clothing, and how the clothing and the body react to the environment around them. A lot of the artists have anatomical drawings and models on their desks, so they come from medical backgrounds, medical art backgrounds, and they've used that knowledge in order to create somebody who seems like she's a real person. And you can see here some of the work that's been done on her body, on how she moves, how her muscles move, how they tense when she tries to climb up the side of a ladder. You can expect to spend a fair amount of time exploring tombs. But one of the things that I do find interesting about this game is that they've expanded the size of those tombs and the scale of them. And so inside each tomb there are multiple puzzles with a final destination. There is also a lot more water and a lot less, there are fewer QTEs. It's a Tomb Raider game, and so you're spending a lot of time with Lara Croft. So it's right. The developers have spent their time on making Lara Croft just right. It comes out on November 10th.
One thing it is to talk about is how many hundreds of digital artists, programmers, and things like that are required to develop a high-end animation like that. And so if you're on a budget, if you're making a film, that's something you have to think about. We'll kind of talk about as we get into the last section. So getting into the industry, like I said, there's a couple people who know a lot more about that than I do. First thing you need is developing a reel. That's your resume, that's your portfolio, and for $300 you can get a Kinect and some software. So if you want to do motion capture professionally, you can start building a reel, figuring out how to do it. If you are a student and you want to go into this, you can get some of the high-end software for free for 3 years, which is pretty cool. And so if you're interested in that, that'd be a great way to look at it. There are professional associations and forums. I have those listed at the end. You can network, contact, and ask questions. For those of you guys taking notes, you're welcome to take notes, but I also have the PowerPoint on my website if you want to download it later, because there is a ton of information in here, and I don't expect everybody to be able to write that down in this time. You can volunteer, you can internship, see who's making films here in Utah. See who's making films if you're not from Utah, wherever you're at, and see if you can find a way to network your way onto set just as a volunteer so you can kind of get that experience and get those connections, and develop a marketable skill set. I think that's good whatever you do. If you don't have a good skill set to get all the dollar bills, they're like, okay, I can get, you don't have any skills, so how are you contributing? So what can you bring to the table to help this film happen? You can also come to LTUE. There's some really great filmmakers here who are doing a lot of independent film. Some doing more commercial film, or well, all of it's commercial, but doing more studio films with the studio. There's a lot of great contacts here. If you look at all the theater and media arts panels, there's some really great people. Some of them are in the room. And just to give a plug, Blake Castleman of Rare Legend Films is giving a screenwriting basics. He's done a couple films as a producer. So he's doing that from 6 to 6:50 tonight, and he would be, he's a very nice person, so he'd be a great person to talk to if you're really interested in learning more about independent filmmaking. So we're going to talk about crossing the uncanny valley. Okay, how many of you guys have seen Rogue One? Okay, how many of you guys, when you saw Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One, that you went, what? What is going on? Versus you were just like, oh, okay, here's another human actor. How many of you guys had this moment of like, okay, something's not quite right?
He's dead.
Well, one, because he's dead, but also with the look of the character. I don't know about you, but I had that. So over here we have Peter Cushing when he was actually alive. And then we have a recreation of Peter Cushing. Very well done, but for me, there's a certain shininess and a digital look to the character that threw me out of the movie. And that kind of eerie, sort of almost human, but you know it's not human feeling is called the uncanny valley. Here's the more technical look. Basically, we see humans all the time, we see the human face all the time. So the more familiar we are with something, and the more the likeness is human, the more likely you hit this valley of like, I don't think that's real. And that's a major problem with any type of art, but especially with motion capture and digital art, especially as we're recreating characters or developing almost human characters on screen, is falling in that the audience's brain is going to sit there and go, is that real or is that not real? I don't think that's real. This is weird. And that's...
It was Princess Leia at the end of that show. Computer.
Yes. So spoiler alert, at the end of Rogue One, Princess Leia has a Princess Leia tap dances. Has a cameo, and that is definitely digitally created. And that one, a lot more people had issues with than Grand Moff Tarkin. Spoiler done. You okay? Okay. So in Crossing the Uncanny Valley, I like practical effects. I really like in The Force Awakens where there was a great mix of practical effects and miniatures enhanced by digital effects, because you get that grittiness and realness, but then you're also able to do more because you can add digital things on there. That's my personal preference. But I always think of, with filmmakers sometimes, we can get, with anything, we can get like, this technology is so cool and so shiny, I'm just gonna do it because it's fun. But they don't stop to think, is that the best way to do that? So you're so preoccupied with whether you could, you don't stop to think you should. And I think limitations actually bring out a lot of our best work. So question to ask, would an in-camera effect work better than doing something through CG or motion capture? Do you have the resources to blend CG to do motion capture at a good enough quality that people aren't going to be thrown out of the movie? And then the ultimate question, is it good storytelling? And I think more than anything, as someone who has, one of the things I studied in my undergrad, because I double majored in English and film, is really about different forms of storytelling. And is this the best way to tell the story you want to tell? And I think a great comparison is with the Empire Strikes Back. In the original version, we just see like the arm of the Wampa and like some shadow or stuff that attacks Luke at the beginning of the movie. We just see like a little bit of the monster, like glimpses of it, but we don't see the whole thing because they couldn't make a really good suit that looked real. And then in the special edition, they went ahead and dropped in the footage of the whole suit, and it is pretty cheesy. So, was that good storytelling? I don't think it was. I think the original was a better storytelling because it had an air of mystery and things. So, I think that's the ultimate question. Is it good storytelling? Whether you're a writer, filmmaker, is it good storytelling? So we got about 10 minutes for questions. This is from Creativity Inc. I read this a couple weeks ago. Visual polish frequently doesn't matter if you're getting the story right. And that's by Ed Catmull, who is one of the founders of Pixar. And most of their stories I feel they got right. We can debate the Good Dinosaur later. So this is from the Pirates of the Caribbean. And I just love this picture of everybody in these basically gray pajamas, and then they turn into these monsters. I think it's really interesting. And if you missed it, this is the link to the PowerPoint. I'll just give you a preview. So there's 4 sections in the appendix of more information. So we'll go back to this page. So you guys have any questions or comments, corrections? Yeah.
Special effects will never save a bad story,
Yeah.
but they'll enhance a good story. But story is supreme. That is the number one most important thing, is to have a good story. After that, it's whatever you can do with it.
Any other questions or comments? That was a lot of information in a short amount of time. Oh.
Actually,
Yeah.
I had a comment about Uncanny Valley. I remember seeing the Final Fantasy movie.
Yeah.
And I remember there are scenes which look very almost photorealistic, and that you could have sworn it was live action. And then there were other scenes that looked completely off. And I think part of it was that they weren't the scenes that were completely off the ones that they weren't quite getting right.
Something that's really interesting to look at with Final Fantasy Spirits Within is how much time it took to render the film versus how much time it takes to render the film now. And that just shows how much the technology has grown over time.
How much has changed?
A lot. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I did the research for this like a month and a half ago. But I think it was like 1 hour for 1 minute of film or something ridiculous like that. But my numbers could be way off versus now it's a lot faster.
Today, is there any advantage for a PC over a Mac?
I think that's another debate for anybody. It depends on what's the industry standard. I personally feel, which one are you more used to? Because both are going to deliver different user experience. I'm a PC person.
And I think, sorry to jump in on here, I think it's more about what you've got inside the computer than the actual housing, you know?
Yeah. Thanks, Sydney. So we've got a few minutes. So why are you guys interested in motion capture? Because I'm cool.
I was doing an audio show once, and I was working with all volunteers. And I had people that wouldn't show up when they were supposed to, which holds everybody up, or dropped out or insisted on doing their thing somewhere else, and the room tone wouldn't match. With motion capture, if you've got that problem, if you need to, you can replace them. You can just complete it out. Once you've got the motions, you can actually write them right out and just completely generate the character. Because you're using an animated character, you can use somebody else to build. So if you're working on a really tight budget and working with volunteers, it gives you more control.
Yeah. I think one thing that is interesting, a lot of people don't think about, one issue that brings up the Uncanny Valley, and also is like when you see bad Photoshop, you can see it, is lighting. That the light is coming from a different angle and things. Somebody who knows more about cinematography, if you would like to talk a little bit more about the importance of lighting, that would be great.
Something else to remember is the color of the light. That often makes something feel more or less realistic, rich. you can pick up on, if you start watching light, you start looking at, you know, the colors that it throws on somebody's skin tone. And then sometimes different skin tones will, you know, reflect the light differently. So, but I think that always is a huge influence on how realistic something is.
Yeah, you could even do something in camera and have bad lighting that doesn't work, or inconsistent lighting that you have to shoot the film a couple different times, and then you composite it together and it just doesn't look right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something we forget a lot with film. A lot of us look at film as like, ooh, this is shiny, and don't realize how many hours of work it takes to get it right. I took a semester-long class where we produced a documentary, and it took about 3 months of the class to produce 5 minutes of film. And that was a lot of hours in those 5 minutes. And that was a documentary where you're just pulling together footage. You're not even writing a script and coming up with sci-fi and fantasy characters. I'd recommend, if you're interested in film, starting simple and building your up to way more complicated things, instead of starting with, and here's a helicopter shot. Because helicopters are expensive. Drones are cheaper. And we're gonna have 1 million explosions. You know, start with, okay, what are your resources and what can you do?
Quads can give you a helicopter shot a lot cheaper.
Yeah. What is your guys' favorite example of good special effects in a current movie? There's only like 12 of us in the room. Yeah.
Back to the idea of that what's best for the story and not worried about what's the coolest technology.
Yeah.
That John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara movie, The Quiet Man.
Yeah.
There's one scene where they're just sitting in front of the fire, and for like 3 seconds they don't do anything, they just sit there, and you just see the light from the fire reflecting off faces. And the only thing bad about that shot is it's black and white, so you can't see Maureen and O'Hara's little hot right there. But other than that, it's just.
White Man's in color.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's black and white. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Oh.
Okay, anyways, it's just they're letting just the light play off the actors, just letting the scene just be there, and they didn't do anything.
One of my favorite special effects is in a Star Wars or Star Trek film where they're blowing up a planet. And they went in the Cow Palace down in California, suspended the device from the ceiling, put the camera directly below it, ran at 1,500 frames per second, so that the explosion spread out like it was going across the vastness of space. And when they first did that, they referred to the old Flash Gordon films where you'd have the guy along and it'd be like they cut the strings and it fell out of the thing. The idea that you don't fall in space, that it just expands, and the way they did that was by getting underneath it. But you have to go at least 1,500 frames per second or faster. I've tried it at 60 frames per second, which is as fast as the camera would go, and it's just it doesn't do anything. You have to have the high-speed camera to pull it off.
Yeah, yeah. Do you guys understand the frames per second? Does anybody have any questions about frames per second, what that means, or anything? Okay. Sometimes when there's like non-film nerds, or, you know, that's fairly simple concept. But people who are less familiar with film, that I forget sometimes, I'm like, maybe I should define that. But you guys look pretty smart in here, right? Do you guys have any questions about, what do you guys find is good storytelling in the film medium?
Like examples of stories that we like?
For examples of stories of like how they set up the story. I think the scene in The Quiet Man is a great example of that. A lot of movies tend to be like bam, bam, bam in your face, but you have to have breathing moments. Something I do as a writer as well is that you have action, 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 and then you have these breathing moments, slow moments that kind of help with the pacing to kind of give it some breathing room, and so that way you can have just feel that moment. You don't need any dialogue. It's just a very still shot, and then we can move forward with the action. But you need that variation between super fast, high rate pace, and then these still moments that really emphasize how fast-paced those next moments are.
I like Archduke and Old Ones.
Yeah.
And that one, it's a comedy, but I mean, it's really cool. And that was what he did just before he went beyond. It's been called the quickie tricks he learned at Universal Artists.
I thought Arrival was really interesting storytelling because it's pretty slow, but I found it really engaging.
Which film?
Yeah.
Which film?
Oh, The Arrival.
The Arrival. Yeah, that one's. I haven't seen that one yet, but I think it's interesting that it's a sci-fi film, but it takes its time delivering that fantastic story
Yeah.
of the unknown.
Well, I think I don't know what worries. I'm not super familiar with that director's body of work, but I hear that his approach to everything. Like he's just really good at building drama and tension.
Psycho's pretty good.
Yeah, Psycho's excellent.
So we've got. So if you're interested in my book, simply with my final shameless plug.
I just read them. It's a great story.
So I planted her in the audience.
Yeah.
Actually, sort of, I did. So this is Stephanie. She's a friend of my sister's, and she's a professional filmmaker here in the Utah area. So she came to join us for a little bit because she's pretty smart. So this is the first book. This is The True Bride and Shoemaker, which is about magic, romance, and sensible footwear. It's a mix of The True Bride and LTUE Shoemaker. This is the second book. It came out this week. It's called The Lady and the Frog, and it follows the Frog Prince and another fairy tale, but if I told you that, you'd have to, that's a spoiler. So it's Welcome to Pippington, where motor cars bump down Old City lanes, frogs transform into men, and mermaids just might be real. So if you like fairy tale retellings, and you like just to curl up with a good book, and at the end feel like you had a nice plate of cookies with milk, this is the kind of book. So in a little bit, I'll be over at the vendor rooms selling these. If you didn't get the link off of there, I have my cards. You can also download the first couple chapters of either book. And if nothing else, thank you for coming, because you can't really present to yourself alone in a room. So I really appreciate you guys being here, and I hope that you guys are able to find a lot of good information. It was a lot of information, and I hope it was helpful and interesting.
What was the presentation you said, 6 o'clock?
It's
Yeah, I think it was at 6.
at 6. This is Blake Castleman. No. Let me go back a couple slides. 6 to 6:50, Blake Castleman, Screenwriting Basics. And I had the opportunity to take a screenwriting class in my film program, and it's a very interesting way of doing things. So again, thank you guys for coming. You can give yourselves a round of applause.